I'm Dr. Stephen Sparks. I work at the University of Johannesburg in the history department, have done since 2012, and I teach there, but also research, obviously, which is what I'm here to do a little bit extra of at the moment. There was indeed a sort of spark for my interest in the oil industry, which was that my late father was a priest, an Anglican priest, and he was moved around at various points by the church to various parts of KwaZulu-Natal. And when I was, I suppose, in my mid-undergrad, he was posted in Wentworth in South Durban, which is right next to two oil refineries, the NGN oil refinery and the Sapref oil refinery. And we lived in Wentworth, and one couldn't help but notice the heavy petrochemical industries that surrounded both Wentworth and Merebank, the adjacent historically Indian township. So that was it, I suppose. And so for my early honors research in the history department in Durban, I tried to understand what South Durban was like before industrialization. So I did a sort of study of the late 19th and early 20th century in that area. And then for my master's, then I did a sort of deep dive into the history, and it turned into mostly a kind of environmental and political history of pollution associated with those oil refineries, and the stories that I was able to find in archives and through interviews about how the residents in that area, including the residents on the historically White Bluff, responded to the emergence of these refineries and the pollution associated with them. So that was kind of how it started, I suppose. And then I did have a very sensible master's supervisor who told me that no, I couldn't also look at Sasol for the MA, save that for the PhD, and so that is indeed what I did. I think the University of Johannesburg is doing has been doing very interesting and exciting things for many years, and I've been here since 2012, and so I've sort of been able to watch it quite closely, and this is certainly one of the more exciting of the things that UJ has done, and I've certainly done my time teaching. I think I taught the first year intro class in the history department, history 1B anyway, for 6 years in a row, this is just a really an opportunity to have some really focused time to work on the book, to finish the book, which is long overdue. So I'm incredibly grateful to Bongani and to JIAS, and of course to UJ, that I am able to be here. And I've obviously heard very good things from many previous fellows, and I'm already thoroughly enjoying my time here, even though it's really still the first week practically. Yeah. A big part of being at JIAS is also the fellow seminars and many other seminars that JIAS hosts, and I think it's wonderful to be able to step out. I mean, this was true of being in Johannesburg anyway, living and working in Johannesburg for over a decade as I have. I know that part of the joy of Johannesburg is on any given day of the week, you can, whichever institution you're based at, even if you're not based at an institution of higher learning, there's so much happening that is fascinating and interesting. And so JIAS has these seminars that are fellow seminars that I, obviously as a fellow, we participate in. And they're going to be very interesting because they're so interdisciplinary. And you know, people talk a lot about interdisciplinarity. I happen to have my doctoral degree is not in history alone, it's in history and anthropology, which I think has given me some of my own eye on Sasolburg. But that kind of interdisciplinarity is fairly easy. I think the interdisciplinarity that JIAS encourages and allows is much more radical actually, and I think that's going to be very fun because we're having conversations really across boundaries, not in a cliched way, and I'm sure that is going to be really brilliant. And I have to say also, just socially, it's so fun. Already breakfasts and lunches are an absolute blast. Learning stuff about other people and their trajectories. And I know that some of the fellows who are maybe not based in Joburg have already been having a blast when they're not actually quietly working in their rooms. They're going to the film festival, cultural events of all sorts. So it's a good place to be based. It's a great place to be based actually, and I'm very thankful to Bongani and to UJ for giving me this opportunity, but also for having the foresight of creating this space so that people are coming to Johannesburg to have these kinds of conversations and hopefully move all sorts of important debates that have very real implications forward. So while I'm here, I'm going to be finishing my book, which is long overdue, comes out of my doctorate, and the title at the moment is Apartheid Modern, Science, Industry and Society in South Africa. And it obviously focuses on Sasol, which in those days, it still does this to some extent, was a project that produced what we call petrol from coal through a conversion process, a synthetic conversion process, which had a former life in Germany and in the United States. The German angle has been slightly overstated. The Nazis did indeed use it for a while, but actually the technology was invented by Jewish scientists. And then the Americans briefly flirted with it, but of course big oil is much too powerful. So South Africa ended up being basically one of the few places. There was a brief period where Franco in Spain tried it out. South Africa became the place where oil from coal, as it's more traditionally known, was tried on this kind of scale. And that's part of what was certainly unusual and somewhat pioneering in sort of techno-scientific terms about the Sasol project. So what my book is doing is it's a capacious goal, certainly an ambitious one, but it incorporates a whole bunch of different things. The political history going back even before apartheid, but certainly also the political history during apartheid, economic history, because you have to obviously understand how it is that a project that actually in many ways economically it doesn't make a lot of sense because it was so experimental, and it is in fact cheaper just to import, as we do mostly now, because almost all of our refineries are gone except for Sasol's. It's cheaper to import oil and refine it locally, which we used to do. Now we don't even do that. We're increasingly, except for Sasol, we're increasingly importing refined products. So there's also the economic history, but I think on top of the political and economic history, which in some ways is more conventional, but also of course extremely important, I'm also trying to tell the story of what it was like to live in Sasolburg and in Zamdela Township, which is the township attached to Sasolburg. And I'm trying to do it in a way that really captures the kind of the feel of the suburbs and of the township, and how that changed over time and has changed over time, and also the implications of the end of apartheid, but also of what you might really call, I think we have to now call, deindustrialization. Sasol still does some manufacturing in Sasolburg. It still makes a lot of petrol from coal in Secunda, but the coal mine that Sasol was based around, called Sigma, closed down in the early 1990s, and I think the consequences of that have been very severe for lots of people, including, in fact, what we would have previously comfortably called the white working class. And I'm also very interested in kind of the social worlds that Sasol enabled for everyone in the context of obviously apartheid, and what's happened since then. It's kind of a paradoxical story, and it's a difficult one to tell, tricky one to tell, and JIAS is, I think, a very good place to try to do that.